Hi, so this is Jun Yamadera, and I'm very kind of honored to organize this workshop. This is called Startup and Tech After the COVID-19. And then I'm very honored to welcome Taizo-san from, now you're in Singapore?
Yeah, I'm in Singapore.
Okay, great. And then I also like to welcome Gerrit Jan from the Netherlands. Hi.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So today we talked about how startups and the tech can change the society or urban design or healthcare or everything after the COVID-19, or maybe I said after COVID-19, but we have to live with COVID-19 because now is a very kind of tough time to everybody. But I think two of the guests are very kind of excited for the kind of new age because they are kind of natural born entrepreneurs. So we are very happy to have you guys have a session today. So let's get started. So can Gerrit Jan, can you start up your kind of pitch, please?
Well, I would like to do it just without slides, if it's okay for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so if you ask me, it's I guess a simple question. What about startups after COVID? But in the past weeks, I was like more and more like, well, we should think about what's happening with cities and technology and also entrepreneurship with COVID, because it's going to stay with us for a couple of years, I guess. So I'm running a World Startup, which is a small investment company. We help startups from all over the world with technology, with network, with access to capital, and also invest ourselves, but only small investments. So we work with startups from India, from Singapore, from Taiwan, from Egypt. And what we are seeing now is that they really have to make huge pivots to stay relevant. And what I would like to discuss in this conversation today, in this workshop, is okay, what do we think they should do best? What are the best options that they should go for? And how can they adapt? And how can they be as relevant as possible for cities and for people in cities across the world?
So Taizo-san, what are you going to talk today?
I have prepared so many slides, so
okay.
If possible, I'd like to share my visions and also the latest updates and so on. But yeah, we can start any kind of the format. To talk three of us, talking among three of us, so it's fine. Or I can start my presentation or something like that.
Okay, so yeah, so I think maybe Gerrit Jan, you can start your talk about 20 minutes or something. Then I can give the baton to the Taizo-san, and then we're gonna discuss about how we deal with the COVID-19.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. So what I would like to discuss today and to talk about is I think the past weeks we've seen a dramatic change, and the first reaction of people was that to postpone a lot and just simply think, okay, this will be over in a couple of weeks, and then we'll turn into life will turn normal again, and we will proceed like we did a couple of days earlier. And then people started to get in this mode, okay, we have to work at home. We have to adapt to that, and we're going to do everything online. So what we're going to do is we're going to mimic what we've been doing offline, and we're going to take that to an online world. that took about a couple of weeks, and then we experienced that the online world is actually, and this is really, to me, the biggest surprise of this whole event, that the online world is not there to mimic what we are doing offline. So that's why all these tools, also these video conferencing tools, also immediately kind of showed us that we were not really paying attention to what the potential of the online world actually is, and actually is providing us. So the next step is now that we're going to create a new services, perhaps even a new world that is more hybrid, and where we will see a lot of services that are helping us with connecting, that are helping us with being social, that are helping us with all kinds of very simple tasks that we are now struggling with, but much more intuitive than it is right now. So we're not creating, if you create an online event, for instance, in a couple of months from now, it won't be a big screen with a huge chat box next to it, but it will be something completely different that we haven't experienced before, and it will have a couple of features that we are used to when we went to a normal offline conference, but we'll have also a lot of very new features to it, and especially when it's hybrid, so especially when it's partially with people together in a space and online, and I think that's an interesting space. So if you look at our real life, then you will see what we'll experience is about the same thing. So it's hard. So restaurants and cafes are closed here in our city and in the Netherlands and all across Europe, actually. And we're hoping now that we can go to these bars again and we can go to these restaurants again. But that will probably not happen. And if we mimic what we were experiencing before, then it probably won't be fun. So I don't expect that it will be fun to go to a concert with 200 people in a room that used to have 1,000 people in it, and then do the same thing that we were used to do. First of all, it's economically not, so in an economic way, it's not doable. So you lose money when you do that. But secondly, it's also not fun. So we have to come up with a totally new experience in our cities and in our venues, in our restaurants, in our stadiums, when we're doing sports, etc. And I think that's an interesting. That's extremely interesting, because that opens up a lot of opportunities. And I think we also have to make a lot of questions. We have to answer a lot of questions here, and we have a lot of choices to make. So, for instance, we are now supporting our local soccer club to come up with new solutions and new ideas how they can enter the new competition. So we have this huge professional soccer competition. Unfortunately, my hometown is The Hague and not Amsterdam, so I'm a fan of one of the less known soccer clubs in the world. But we are used to playing we're used to having a great competition. Many people in the stadiums and many people looking at that. So, but now they are really struggling. So they have no idea how to organize this in a way that is entertaining, that is relevant, that is social, that is economic viable, etc. And so the current space they've created will not be suitable for that in the upcoming 2 years. And now we can make a lot of choices, like, okay, so if we're going to do this in a different way, how are we going to do that? And what kind of setting do we want to create? Do we want to democratize it, make it more open to the public? And shall we perhaps go to parks and play with a professional soccer team for an audience of 300 or 400 people, and then make sure that you have it very well, that it is very well recorded and broadcasted, but create an atmosphere that more resembles the amateur, what used to be the amateur football club. So that's a choice that you can make. So we can make things that turned into like these big professional, spectacular events. We can bring them back to society and we can make them small again, like they actually used to be. And I think then you get a more one-on-one, a more human experience again. And that's kind of a paradox. So if we make a couple of choices in a certain direction and we go into a certain, we move into a certain space with the city, we can make a more human city. Although we are now experiencing it like, oh, it's so awful. We have to keep distance, and we are only there in small groups, etc., etc. And that will take at least another year or maybe even longer. So I like to look at this as an opportunity to rethink how we are creating this society and how we are creating our cities. And this how to go about with professional sports, how to move forward. That is a great example. The other one, because once someone told me is the day I turned into an amateur was that the other one is calling himself a professional. And that's also what's going on in sports, of course. So the other thing, another example that I think is really is interesting and is now perhaps it's going to bring a lot of value, is that in the Netherlands we try to make this tracking app. So an application to track everyone, etc. And it didn't work out. So the government tried to create that within like 4 weeks. But it just didn't happen because people were too afraid of the privacy issues, of the tracking all the personal data in the application. So what was actually great about this whole process was the discussion. That suddenly, finally, we had a discussion about privacy and about integrity on a state level. And people looking at it over the weekend, looking at these debates and following it. And then the outcome was, we shouldn't do this. So now we are perhaps starting a project which is about, okay, but if we have all that data, how can we actually use it in a proper way with respect for privacy, with respect for our personal sphere? And how can we do that? And how can we then add value? Which is not the typical privacy issue, the privacy debate we had so far, which was more like, well, just we don't want it to happen. No, we need the personalized services. We need the on-demand services. So we want to have these data-driven added value services in our lives. But I don't want to give up my privacy. And we can do it. It is possible. And now suddenly it is also like we're creating these coalitions of people that are actually saying, well, okay, I can use my technology to make telco data anonymous, and then we can actually make something out of it, and then we can do something in terms of health services, mobility services, governmental services, etc., etc. And that's also, I think, one of the great things that is happening right now. So these are two very kind of positive stories. The third one is that I'm like many people, I'm personally facing a lot of uncertainty and experiencing an enormous amount of uncertainty about, okay, but how are you going to make money? So how are you actually going to create business value? And because, well, there are so little examples. Of course, we see a lot of industries that are searching. So like Amazon, of course, or data providers, or well, other industries. But there are also a lot of industries that are like struggling with a user uncertainty, and it's not clear, well, what to do. So how you can overcome such a period of, let's say, 9 months or 12 months or 14 or even longer where you're just not sure when there's so little benchmarks. That for me is something that I'm really struggling with. And I see a lot of people, of course, especially in the very simple, no, not simple, it's not the right word, but in the like down to earth catering industry and in the retail industry, but also in the startup scene. So what used to be normal, and you could say like, okay, this is normal, and now I'm going just a little bit to the right of that, and I'm going to set up my business here, and then I'm going to compete with the other ones. That is now in a lot of parts is completely gone. So you're everybody is in a blue ocean, but we're not sure where the ocean is. That's how I'm also now experiencing this a bit. So these are things. So to summarize, one, choices. We are in a perfect opportunity to go to our local governments, to our regional governments, to go to our big corporates, and to redesign things in such a way that we, just like them better than it was before. And that's a huge debate also. Secondly, so I think it's really cool that we are having strong and good and in-depth discussions about data, and I really expect a lot from that. And I hope that we can move that in the right direction. And thirdly, it's about it's uncertainty, and also embracing that in a way, and feeling good about that you're actually are uncertain what is about to happen. And the reaction that I see, fortunately here in the Netherlands, but also across the world, is experiment. So just do, act, create something, try it out, which is of course a normal part of the hacker culture, of the maker culture, also the tech culture, but is now also adopted by other parts of the society. So, for instance, the government. So our state government organizing an appathon, which was actually not a hackathon, but it had a bit of a resemblance. But that they are now adopting these very incremental design and prototyping methods that used to be like, okay, that's a different world. We don't do that. So experiment is extremely important. But I also think an extreme focus on added value for users, and not on politics, or not on meta discussions, but more like, okay, what is this? How is this helping people here in this neighborhood, in this park, on this beach, in this care institute? And a little bit forgetting about this political, like highbrow, this policy method, and I also see that now happening. And thirdly, I think I'm a civil engineer, so I'm not really a techie, but I am an engineer. But I think embracing technology is also something that we will. That I'm seeing right now, and that should be part of this. That should be part of the upcoming years, and not technology as a consumer product. So, but embracing technology also. I expect that because of this more rapid prototyping, a lot of citizens and a lot of people that are now perhaps seeing themselves more like a consumer, that they will become more like a prosumer and more part of the experiment and part of the change that we are making. So, and I think that will happen, for instance, in public transport, but also in other mobility areas, and also in healthcare. Is more like an interaction between the consumer and the supplier, the service provider, that is going to be more experimental, more incremental. and it's going to change, and that's going to change our relationship with brands and with startups and etc. in an interesting way. So yeah, that's something that I would like to start with.
Yeah, thank you very much. You raised a very exciting and interesting kind of topics to discuss later. The choices, data and the privacy, uncertainty, that's a kind of great topics. So thank you very much. So can Taizo-san, can you kind of present your kind of presentations?
Okay. Just a moment. Can you see it? Can you see it? Okay.
Yeah, I see you. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Right. First of all, let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Taizo. I'm a serial entrepreneur and also an investor to support the innovative startups around the world. And I'm definitely a startup enthusiast, I dare to say. And the last 2 decades, I've been engaging in the internet-related industry, including the games or media. And in these days, especially in these days, I'm very passionate about updating the education. But anyway, as an entrepreneur, I'm keep challenging, keep creating something very new, which is good to the society. And also, as a senior entrepreneur, I'm supporting the younger entrepreneurs who are struggling for the growth or the improving their products and services. And so one of my passions is the building the great startup ecosystem for social good in the world. Let me share a little short story about how I started my first career as an entrepreneur. When I was 23 years old, I met a guy called Gerrit Jan, who is the founder of the Yahoo. And as you might know, or maybe the young guys don't know very well, but Yahoo is one of the commercial search engine in the world at the time. And still, he was very young at the time. He was 25 years old or something like that. And I'm 23. I was 23. And then he started he developed the search engine for the website in Stanford University. And then he started the commercial service. And right after that, he came to Japan. And then he started involving some comrades to create the search engine even in Japan, because he loved Japan so much, because he loved small wrestling, and also his wife is also the Japanese. So, and then very fortunately I could meet him, and through the word of mouth. And then he came to me, and then he described a very interesting metaphor about the episode of the Isaac Newton. As you know, the Newton has been inspired by the apple falling down from the tree to the bottom, to the ground. And he used that metaphor, what the Yahoo is, what the search engine is. You know, so he predicted the future that eventually any kinds of the wisdom or knowledge, information will be uploaded to the internet, but without search engine, we can't search any information. So the Yahoo is like something like the instrument which makes apple fall down in front of Newton, right? So the apple became the apple which fell down in front of Newton. It became a very great inspiration for Newton. And so eventually the future Newton or like a Newton-like scientists or the Edison like inventors, any kind of technologists, they will be inspired by some information, but with that search, we will lose our opportunity cost will be so big to make a better chemistry, the great chemistry around the world. So I was so inspired by the story that Gerrit told me. And then I strongly asked him to let me in. So I started developing the Yahoo Japan, the Japanese version of the search engine in 1996. So at the time, the Newsweek covered our story, and this is me. More than 20 years ago, and I had more hair than today, by the way. But anyway, since then, I've been heavily involved to the startup scene in Asia. So those are the companies I established from scratch, or I brought some services from the Silicon Valley or China or some other places, and as one of the co-founders. And yeah, very fortunately, I could get some success. I could make some success, and more I earned the money, the less I kept my hair. But anyway, I'm a guy like that. And then let me talk about my view about the COVID-19 and after the pandemic. I dare to say that the COVID-19 is a minimum viable catastrophe, right? Yeah, maybe you can understand very quickly. So, of course, many people died, and it's so sad, but not so all the people in the world, right? So, in that sense, it's a minimal viable catastrophe. But I think the upcoming the bigger catastrophe will become. The bigger one will be the gap widening society, right? So the French economist Thomas Piketty, I was so inspired by reading his book, and according to him, according to the very long, more than 10 years research about the capital increase rate and economic growth rate in the historical books. And then he proved that almost always, most of the time in our history, the capital increase is bigger than the economic growth, which means that the red line, the capital increase, in other words, it's a property increase rate. It's the rich man's the properties increase rate, right? And the green line is the people, the common people's wage increase rate. So most of the time in our history, he proved that the fact that the always gap was widening, except during the World War I and II. So as you know, the World War I and II is truly the tremendous catastrophe. So only in that period, the increase rate will be the wage increase rate overcome the property increase rate. And then he predicted the future that the gap will be wider than today because of the great development of the AI and robots and so on. So that they will replace our job, and some people who can't adapt the new paradigm quickly may lose the job opportunities and so on. And as you might know, the George Orwell published the novel, the sci-fi novel called 1984 in 1944. And the novel, in that novel, the big brother, the mother computer called Big Brother is always watching, monitoring, and controlling the people, citizens. And the Big Brother led the citizens to the very the catastrophic directions. So, but the people recognize that this is a sci-fi, and it's the archetype of the dystopia. But you know, as you know, in these days, you know, especially in China, for example, always that dystopia is being prevailed. So not only in China, but also even in Japan or even other countries in the world, this kind of trends will be bigger and bigger than today. Especially the COVID-19 is the great trigger to control the citizens by the government or authorities for the sake of the national security or the defending the terrorism or something like that. You know, so I like to finish this story with in a positive directions, but so far we should think more about this kind of things. As Gerrit said, that the privacy is much more important than before, and European people have a long history to fight and to fight back to secure the human rights. So that's why they are very, very conscious and sensitive about by the government. But especially in Asia, there's less history like that. So citizens will accept this kind of things. Where the citizen doesn't care so much more than the European countries about the privacy and security and so on for the sake of the securities and so on. So, so that will be in my opinion, in my personal opinion, that will be one of the possible catastrophe after the COVID-19. So, from 2015, I started the new activities called Mistletoe, and the Mistletoe is from my perspective, it's the latest the startup for me. But it's not a typical startup just for the sake of earning the big money or something like that. Our mission is we turn entrepreneurial challenges into world impacts. And we call ourselves the community for collective impact. So our community is comprised of the various kind of people like the senior entrepreneurs, investors, lawyers, or even ex-regulators, researchers, artists, and technologists, and so on. And we have various kind of views, various kind of backgrounds, various kind of nationalities, and cultural backgrounds. So if we find a nice startup, and if the founder is struggling for some various kind of things, then we will definitely support them so that they can grow faster and more. So currently, we are supporting the 190 startups and the venture funds in 15 countries so far. And we have invested $255 million to 126 startups. And also we are supporting the venture funds because the venture funds, the boutique venture funds is also the very important player of the startup ecosystem. So as an investor of the funds, we are supporting those kind of people so that we can leverage our capital to grow our ecosystem more. And also sometimes we donate to the nonprofits or foundations that has same mission or visions, and so that we like to increase, so that we can create the rich ecosystem, like rich forest. So let me show you some a couple of the startups, which will be from my perspective, which will be the great post-pandemic good solutions. The first one, the founder is the Italian American called Keller Rinaldo. And he came to me in 2013, and then he showed just one sketch, this. At the time, I didn't know that the term drone, but he showed me this picture, and then he told me that he asked a question to me that, hey, Taizo, Taizo-san, how many times in a week you ordering online? And I answered that once or twice in a week. Yeah, it's an average in the United States. But I dare to say that in the future, we will order 5 times a day or 10 times a day. What? I don't have to. I don't order online many things in one day. And then he explained that this kind of autonomous drone will deliver the goods. So so he told me that you don't need to keep the fridge in your house. What? Because you don't have to store the fresh foods in your house, because within the 5 to 10 minutes, the autonomous drone will deliver to you. What? And at the time, I was so amazed. But the things that his vision was so crazy and interesting, so I bet to his dream, and then he made it happen. He created this autonomous aerial vehicle, and he dispatched in Luanda, Africa. Can you listen to the sound? Can you
maybe
listen?
not.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. They are carrying the vaccines and bloods, the medical stuff in Rwanda, Africa, and because at the time it's 4 years ago, and at the time the Rwanda government was really suffering for the solutions to deliver the medical stuff because there was a war inside of Rwanda, and most of the infrastructure was destroyed. Railroads are destroyed, and the car roads are destroyed. So they couldn't deliver the medical stuff in the to the hospitals in the country. So they were looking for the solutions, and then they started providing this logistics solutions, and they actually the last 4 years that they saved more than 10,000 people's lives. So it worked very well, and in each hospital doesn't have the luxury to keep the fridge in their hospitals. So, but with these solutions, they can deliver the medical stuff within 15 minutes or so. So his prediction came true. The second thing, this Indian guy, Joginda Tankela, he is now providing the health kiosk like this in India. You know, in India, most of the people, common people, have no experience to go to the hospital for a medical checkup. So they put the kiosk on the street, in the station or the bus stop and so on. And then with just small coins that anyone can check the medical data, a medical checkup. So they started providing this service in more than 1 year ago, just 1 year ago, and then it brought up, and many people made a long queue to check up because most of the common people are daily workers, and then if they become sick, then they can't earn the money, so they can't live. So that's why the maintaining a health condition is very critical, literally critical for them. So they are providing not only the medical checking up functionality, but also they are providing they call the nano insurance. So with just the small coins, they can check the medical conditions, but also with additional small coins, they can keep the insurance to lose the job. And then since the COVID-19 is prevailing even in India, so they started adding the features of the virus check, germs check, and so on. And the third one, Miranda one, she is the chemist and scientist, the synthetic biology scientist. And then she is now developing a new technology to solve the plastic waste issue. So according to her new invention, they can turn the plastic material wastes into the variable materials like photopolymer and so on. So so they can turn it's like a real alchemy or something like that. They turn the plastic waste into the organic compound called DBA, and the DBA can be transformed to the various kind of the materials like photopolymer. Photopolymer is the very well known for cement, for the teeth, and so on. And also it's used for the semiconductor, the materials and so on. So they can turn the wasted plastics into the variable things. So she is dreaming of we human beings no more. We don't have to create the new plastics anymore, because we can recycle and upcycle the existing plastics into the variable materials. And those are the great deep tech startups we are supporting. And I think so they are one of the cutting edges to solve the issues in the world. But I believe that not only them, but also there are so many young people who are researching and developing the great technology to solve the big issues in the world like them. So I like to keep supporting those kind of people so that we can change the world a better place. So lastly, I'd like to explain my latest startup. This is my son, 6 years old, and I strongly felt that the existing education system is terrible, right? So we have to update to the new one as quickly as possible. So we started from 3 years ago. We started the initiative with this Estonian lady called Maris, and it's called the Pivita. So Vivita is, we call it the creativity accelerator for the kids, like this. This is the free space. This is an after-school program, and it's completely free of charge, so any kids can come anytime. And we have no curriculum, no teachers, but we provide the environment, good environment for them to foster their creativity. So they're like a startup accelerator. The children will come to us and they will make a pitch to us that I like to make a robot. I'd like to make a dress. I like to make an accessory with a motion sensor and LED. Oh, wow, that's cool. Let's make it happen. And then we have hundreds of supporters who have some expertise of the engineering or design or arts and so on. And then so they will start the prototyping by themselves. But if they struggle, we will support them to make their prototype better and so on. So we started 3 years ago, and then currently we have 9 to 10 stops in the world, and we like to. I like to expand this as one of the movement of the new educational activities involving not only the teachers or educators, but also the citizens, adults, elderly people, and so on. So I strongly believe that, as I said, that I have a strong passion to the updating the education system, and then I believe that the post-COVID-19, we need these kind of things to make the people give the people the confidence or self-esteem that we can develop, we can make anything by ourselves to live our life better. Otherwise, the social division of labor. That because of the social division of labor, we have no skills to live by ourselves. So we like to encourage especially the children to foster the capability to produce the foods or energy or water or the technology we need to live our life by ourselves. So this is the last slide that Isaac Newton said that no great discovery was ever made without a podcast. And he mentioned this phrase during he wrote the book called Principia. You know, the Principia is the great book of the today's civilization. You know, the Newton's physics is the basis of our civilization. And I heard that at the time, the Great Plague, the Black Death, was happening. So he had to come back to his hometown because the Oxford and Cambridge were shut down. So and while he was in the house, he wrote this book, getting the inspiration from the apple. So I strongly think that we should turn this isolation into inspiration, leveraging it to think about the new future, so that we can turn this great plague into the great realization. That's all. Thank you for listening.
Wow, thank you very much, Taizo-san.
Yeah, thank
I'm
you.
I'm very kind of impressed about your big passion about education and the kids, and I really like overview of all the kind of startups which you are kind of investing, which is a kind of new normal, like a new technology. So they are very, very super exciting. And yeah, let's talk about some discussion about that. So first of all, you know, after the very exciting story, I'm kind of really kind of hesitate to start this kind of conversation. But I read the Nikkei newspaper recently, and then they said big company and VC stop investment or work with open innovation. 90% big companies or VCs make it kind of shrink or shut it down because of the uncertainty. So I think it's a kind of little bit depressing, because now is a very good time for them to strap the face of the startups to acquire or invest for the new things, because they have a lot of kind of cash, so they never bankrupt in the next 2 months or something. But the startup is kind of struggling, I think. So how about the situation in Netherlands, Gerrit? Yeah.
Well, first of all, we see a lot of sort of the first response of the government to help entrepreneurs was very good, and there's a solid package right now for entrepreneurs in general. There's also a stimulus like bridge loans up to 100 million euros right now, specifically for the startup scene. And I think that's also a great effort, and I think that will also expand in the future. So in the upcoming months, there will be more dedicated funds specifically for startups. As for the innovation, because I think that's actually more important. So it's good to have bridge loans and it's good to invest, but it's better to have revenue and to actually add value to society. And so we started Resilient Society, which is a platform for governments, for businesses, and for universities to work together on solutions and to help each other to stay innovative and quickly adapt to the new situations as we're faced with. And that is really going to, that's really interesting to see what is happening there. Because finally we are opening up, not finally, but we are opening up a lot of silos and now working together with scientists, with corporate, with startups, and jointly are creating new services. And I think that's really interesting to see. And I'm convinced that as soon as we show both government, universities, and businesses, also large corporates, that is a sensible thing to do, and that you actually create something that is valuable, then they will start investing in that, and they will start supporting it. Because indeed, they still have, certain corporates still have the budgets to do so. They have the cash. They can indeed invest in innovation, and they should right now. But this is, for me, this is a really good opportunity to start working together more closely on all kinds of challenges. Yeah.
Okay, great. So now is a kind of very difficult time for the kind of companies, which is kind of based on old legacy. But if we think, this is a kind of new start, so let's forget about the old world totally, and then let's make a new kind of world order after the COVID-19. That's a kind of new normal, and that's a kind of great timing for the startup, because they don't need to stick on the old kind of legacy. And I'm very much impressed about the Taizo-san's vision, because now Japanese government said only 5.6% of all the kind of people in Japan work from remote. And then many people in Tokyo, my friends, said, "Oh, it's unbelievable. I mean, we can work from remote." But I'm living in a very kind of small city, but I feel like none of my friends work on the remote, because we are kind of based on a very old society. But Taizo-san, you shut down the office, and you don't have an office in Japan at all.
No.
I mean, you stop having an office in Tokyo, and then you don't have full-time employee, which is very unusual. And then you don't have an office. But you have a connection with lots of kind of professional. So I had it maybe two years ago, I think. I think, oh, Taizo-san get crazy or something. But now is a kind of very good, right decision. And then also, you started living anywhere kind of project, which is we can work and we can live wherever we are. So it's not a kind of simple city, urban, and the rural area kind of comparison, but we can, move and then we can work and then live wherever we want because of the technology. So very pro technology kind of driven concept. And then my question is how Taizo-san has such kind of visions in the future.
Yeah, the COVID-19 is in a sense, the great trigger for us to change our mindset and behavior, or not only our mindset and behavior, but also the way of living or paradigm. So I strongly believe that today everybody in the world have recognized that living in a congested area like a big city, metropolitan city, is very dangerous, right? So we should spread to the nationwide, and we should not get together in one small place too much, right? So and also everybody. I was so surprised that only 5.6% of the Japanese people doing the remote work, but eventually they will come to know that we don't have to go to the office every morning by getting on the train rush, right? So then we have a choices. Japan, for example, that there's great nature around the nation wide. So we can, and the rural area is much cheaper and more rich, the nations. So if we compare to living in a city side or rural side, it doesn't matter because living in a city is risky, too risky. So that is the great. I think it's great moment to change our way of living or our civilization. I dare to say.
Yeah. I expect to see a great revival of the smaller cities. So in the Netherlands, we have this 4 big cities and then 40 smaller cities, and then a lot of very small cities. I think these 40, they are gonna be a lot more interesting in the upcoming years.
I think
now.
Go ahead.
Now everybody recognizes that the less is more, right?
Yeah, and I think also what is also interesting is this idea of space. So we're going to organize an online event. Well, we were about to organize an event in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. Now we turn it into an online event, but suddenly Rotterdam is no longer interesting in the way that it's no longer confined to that space. So what does it mean to organize an online event in Rotterdam? I think so, like we are doing right now here, an online event in Kobe. So what does that mean? What it actually does, it means that we're doing it with a community that has a certain shared value and a sense of place, but not actually sharing the place. And I think that's also interesting, and which it opens a lot of opportunities, a lot of doors. Like, okay, I can be Rotterdam without actually being in Rotterdam.
Okay, so this kind of story reminds me 1993 because it's kind of deja vu because I first used internet in 1993, and then I was in a very local city, and then at that time I was quite shocked. And then at that time we are making a kind of website, and then of course there is no Google. And then only Yahoo is a kind of search engines, which Taizo-san is very hardworking. And at that, in 1994, I checked keyword Aizu, my city, and Tokyo. Then Aizu has 6,000 pages, but Tokyo has only 4,000 pages, which is my city is bigger than Tokyo, which is kind of unbelievable. And that time I realized, oh, I can work anywhere. I can live anywhere. That's my kind of strong kind of, experience in 25 years ago. But it's very kind of sarcastic. Last 25 years, people go to big cities and the local area is kind of struggling with the economy. But now is, finally our time may have come. So that's kind of my kind of idea.
Yeah.
And then let's discuss about the kind of privacy issues, because privacy was invented in the 19th century, right? So it's rather kind of new concept. But these days, lots of kind of companies or kind of private companies or kind of nations, focus on the kind of fight against with the kind of privacy. And then some people says it's a kind of end of the privacy. Some people are kind of paranoia, but it's a like in Europe, GDPR is kind of very big things. But we may lose such kind of how do you say, efforts of the kind of blood and the tears for the more than the century. So how we keep such kind of good traditions?
Well, yeah, if I can react to that. So first of all, I think it's not necessarily just about privacy, it's more about control. And we've been fighting, really fighting for centuries as citizens to get more control in our democracies, in our society. Data and information is control.
Yeah.
If
I totally agree with Gerrit. It's a matter of control. So in my opinion, the transparency of the government is very, very important. So of course we are enjoying the fruit of the information technology. So without ICT, we can't live the better life today. So, but I have realized that if I visit when I visited Estonia, the Estonian government is one of the most advanced country for the digitized digital government, and they emphasize that the prime minister and president, even the president, emphasize that our beauty is not the digitization, but the transparency. She said. Because of the transparency, citizens can monitor what kind of thing the government is monitoring the data, extracting the data, and controlling, and so on. So we are open up to the citizens completely. So that's why we can run the government very healthily. So that's the key. So and that's the most that's the thing that especially the Japanese government doesn't follow. Right?
Most governments don't do that. So unfortunately, So in Europe, I think Estonia is a great example, and it's a really they're way out there to the right in the graph of the transparency and digitalization, etc. And so it's not about the privacy. It's every time we make this a privacy discussion about what's going on in my house and in my life. But I think it's really more interesting to really focus on, okay, what are governments doing? What are large corporates doing? And how are they applying policies? How are they applying rules and designing their services and applying it in such a way that I know what is happening and that we can keep on checking. Okay, it is really beneficial for me and for society in general.
I think we, especially I am living in Fukushima, so we learned a lot from the 3/11 nuclear accident, because we have trust issues. Trust issues is a very kind of big things. And then after the kind of 3/11, we have a lot of kind of civic tech, citizen science, startups or organization or an NGO. So people work very hard for that. So I think even tech can restrict the people's privacy, but tech can also enforce the people's privacy under control. So yeah, that's pretty good things. So maybe we have one or two questions. I mean, we got some question about the audience, like how COVID-19 change urban design. So do you have, maybe Gerrit Jan, you have some ideas for that? Or what kind of answer for?
Now what it changes, what is interesting perhaps is that, so perhaps we've been fortunate that this only happened a couple of times in the last 100 years. So if you don't look at the world wars, it's the Spanish flu, and then we had the Mexican flu, and now with SARS was really, well, not that big, and now we have a more like a pandemic. But what if this happens like every 6 or 7 or 8 years, which is also possible? It's happened in the 16th century. It was like eight times, or and going all across the world, at least the civilized world. So what if this is happening more often? How do you design your systems? How do you design your cities? If you have to go, well, from abundancy to more like restraining yourself. So that flexibility, thinking about that flexibility, I think that's interesting for a student right now. We're really taking a huge step into, so everybody, so you mentioned that you started with internet like in the 90s. You were like, okay, this is going to be, and now I can work remotely, and et cetera, et cetera. And I also can remember that we were like I'm also a little bit older, so I can remember that we were like, okay, this is going to change so much, but it took us so long to actually do it, and we're now doing stuff that we were thinking of like 20 years ago. What I think is going to happen, and I think is interesting for students, is that cycle is going to rapidly change, and it will be like 5 years or even 4 years. And then the hard part is, for if you design and work on a city, is that you are used to think in terms of 80 years and 100 years. And how do you balance that? So how do you balance this long-term sustainable, also cultural embedded way of working with extreme flexibility that you need, because we're in these weird dynamic world-threatening situations constantly. Because, well, we're now facing a pandemic, but climate change is also going to create a couple of very dramatic changes if you are living in a delta in the upcoming 10, 20, 30 years.
Okay,
so the balance is interesting to look at.
Okay, thanks. So maybe one last question about maybe for Taizo-san. Fujii-sensei questioned, what is the most important point in education, especially in a university? What should the young student learn after with COVID-19 era?
So obviously, we should shift from existing education system to the lifelong learning system.
Yeah.
Right. So you know, most of the people study learn so hard until the age of the 20 or something like that. But and after that, after the people graduated university, they started working for a company, and then no learning, right? But well, of course, we should keep on learning to update ourselves. So in the sense, we need universities to open up to not only for younger people, but also the older people like us. For example, when I was 22 years ago, I went to the Tokyo University, but I I have no motivation to learn something, because I was heavily obsessed to the playing music. So, and I had no motivation at the time. But in these days, I have more responsibility than that at the time, that before, and also I have more I like to know more, right? So if possible, I like to go to the university, but it's not so easy for me to go to the university, because today's university is we have to contribute full time to go to the university, right? For example, so the university should be the change to the more open to the citizens, and also the PhD. PhD is, of course, it's great, but to create a new innovative research and so on. But in my opinion, the university should be more open, open the door to the everybody. Yeah, if I briefly said like that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Perhaps if I can add to that.
Yeah.
Well, in the past decades, we started to work in multidisciplinary education systems. So we were mixing engineers with lawyers, etc. We've been doing that in the Netherlands. And now we can take the next step, is actually create creative law institutes and create. So don't just put people together, but change the education itself. Because I want more creative lawyers. I want very creative medicines, medical professionals. And to change that is like a next step of merging these old, these old silos. That's how I think
break the silo.
So creativity everywhere, instead of there's this bunch. There are the technicians, there are the technology guys, and the creative guys, and we are here in this other corner. Yeah. Okay,
thank you very much. So almost we are kind of time up. So thank you for joining the kind of workshop, and it's very inspiring talk. And then I hope this talk encourage people stay at home. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.